You were never broken. That was simply the easiest story for them to believe. From the very start, your mind refused to move at the same pace as everyone else. While others searched for comfort and familiarity, you chased meaning. While they accepted patterns, you examined them. And questioning what others accept without thought has always made people uneasy. They laughed, not because you were wrong, but because understanding you required effort. Labels became their shortcut. Calling you strange, unstable, or excessive allowed them to avoid confronting something deeper. The possibility that you were seeing layers they never noticed. It felt safer for them to shrink your complexity than to expand their perception. Every smirk carried uncertainty. Every joke disguised discomfort. They mistook intensity for instability because depth unsettles those who survive on simplicity. You changed the atmosphere without trying. Your silence said more than their conversations. Your presence forced reflection, and reflection is something many people quietly resist. What they called chaos was actually compressed vision, thoughts forming faster than language could carry them. What they dismissed as unrealistic was simply early. Ideas ahead of their time often sound unreasonable to those anchored in the present. They sensed difference before you fully understood it yourself. That is why their laughter was loud. Noise is often used to hide confusion. You remember that distance, not physical distance, but emotional separation. The feeling of standing inside crowded rooms yet remaining untouched by them. Conversations shifted when you spoke. Expressions tightened when your ideas stretched beyond familiar boundaries. No one said it directly, yet the message was clear. You were difficult to categorize. Your quiet observation was mistaken for hesitation. Your restraint looked like uncertainty to people who equated volume with confidence. Subtle pressure followed. Suggestions to simplify yourself, requests to soften your thoughts, gentle attempts to reshape you into something easier to understand. They wanted translation, not truth. But every dismissal strengthened something inside you. Isolation stopped feeling like punishment and slowly became training. While others bonded through comfort, you developed clarity through solitude. Long nights turned into reflection. Disappointment sharpened awareness. You began noticing patterns, how insecurity hides behind criticism, how fear disguises itself as humor, how people defend their limitations by attacking what challenges them. Complexity frightened them because complexity requires growth. Instead of stretching to meet you, they reduced you to definitions they could manage. Over time, you realized something essential. Exclusion was not proof of inadequacy. It was confirmation of difference. The friction was shaping discipline. The loneliness was building endurance. What felt like rejection was refinement in disguise. You were not malfunctioning in a stable world. You were functioning in an environment that lacked the range to recognize you. And then you started noticing something strange. The same people who dismissed you openly watched you quietly. Their attention lingered when they thought you weren't aware. Questions became more calculated. Observations more careful. You were not ignored, you were studied. Unpredictability unsettles people who rely on control. You didn't follow expected reactions. You paused when others rushed. You stayed calm when tension rose. You answered selectively, revealing only fragments of your thinking. That restraint forced speculation, and speculation breeds unease. They tried to map you like a complex signal, searching for patterns they could predict. Yet every time they thought they understood you, you shifted direction. Not randomly, but independently. Independence removes leverage, and without leverage, influence disappears. That loss of control created quiet resistance. Narratives formed around you, subtle distortions designed to make you easier to dismiss. Ridicule became a defense mechanism. Humor became containment, not because you were threatening in action, but because you were unpredictable in thought. Beneath their reactions was recognition. They sensed potential before you claimed it. They noticed range before you defined it, and awareness without understanding often turns into fear. You were never naive to this shift. You felt the tension beneath casual conversations. What sounded like jokes often carried caution. What looked like indifference concealed observation. The room adjusted when you entered because certainty weakened. And slowly, without announcement, a realization began forming inside you. Their reactions were never random. They were defensive. Not against who you were, but against what your presence revealed about their own limits. At some point, the change happened quietly. No announcement, no dramatic turning point. Just a subtle internal pivot that even you barely noticed at first. The urge to argue faded. The need to explain yourself slowly dissolved. You stopped correcting misunderstandings, not because you agreed with them, but because you understood something deeper. Clarity does not require permission. Where you once tried to be understood, you began conserving energy. Silence stopped feeling like defeat and started feeling like control. You allowed assumptions to exist without interference. People continued forming opinions, but you no longer felt responsible for managing them. Your attention turned inward. Instead of scattering your focus across endless conversations and unnecessary debates, you gathered it. Stillness replaced urgency. Observation replaced reaction. You listened more carefully, not just to words, but to tone, timing, hesitation. You began noticing what people revealed unintentionally. Detachment did not make you cold. It made you precise. Without emotional noise clouding perception, patterns became obvious. Motives surfaced before actions followed. You could sense tension before it appeared. Situations unfolded in predictable sequences once you learned to step back and watch instead of immediately engaging. What others once called intensity started transforming into discipline. You didn't suppress your depth, you organized it. Thoughts that once collided began aligning. Impulse evolved into intention. Your mind stopped racing outward and started building inward structure. The same traits that once overwhelmed you became tools once directed with purpose. And with that structure came control. You realized that seeking approval quietly hands authority to others. The moment validation becomes necessary, freedom disappears. So you release the expectation of recognition. You stopped waiting for acknowledgement. Progress no longer depended on applause. You allowed results to speak on their own timeline. This internal recalibration marked the real beginning of your evolution. You were no longer reacting to the environment. You were designing your response to it. Composure became natural rather than forced. Decisions slowed, but accuracy increased. You chose actions deliberately instead of emotionally. Boundaries formed without explanation. You didn't announce distance, you simply practiced it. Conversations became selective. Engagement became intentional. Not everyone received access to your thoughts anymore. Where you once revealed ideas prematurely, you learned the power of restraint, and something unexpected happened. The environment around you began to change. When you entered a space, conversations subtly adjusted. People measured their words more carefully. The casual disrespect that once appeared freely started disappearing. Humor directed at you faded before it could fully form. No confrontation caused this shift. No demand created it. It came from presence. You no longer radiated the need to be accepted, and that absence changed perception. Restraint replaced display. Precision replaced excess. You spoke less, but each word carried weight because it was intentional. Unpredictability, once mistaken for instability, now felt like autonomy, and autonomy reads as control. Your pauses introduced uncertainty. Your delayed reactions made others reconsider their own behavior. When people cannot predict you, they hesitate, and hesitation quietly redistributes influence. Without trying to dominate, dynamics began reorganizing themselves around your tempo. You were no longer adapting to the room was adapting to you. Authority arrived silently. There were no dramatic gestures, no raised voice, no visible effort, only steadiness, measured responses, calm observation. The strength came not from forcing attention, but from no longer chasing it. You withdrew from unnecessary exposure. Plans stayed private. Intentions remained internal. Strategy replaced spontaneity. You invested time into preparation without announcing progress. Research replaced rhetoric. Discipline replaced impulse. You stopped proving potential and started building reality. Your circle of disclosure shrank, not out of fear, but clarity. Energy became valuable, and you refused to spend it carelessly. Time was guarded. Commitments were deliberate. Distractions were filtered quietly. People noticed the distance but struggled to interpret it. Those who once believed they understood you found themselves uncertain. Old assumptions no longer applied. The transparency they relied on disappeared, replaced by composure and quiet advancement. And that uncertainty unsettled them, because visibility creates comfort, and you were no longer visible in predictable ways. You were refining behind the scenes, layer by layer, thought by thought, decision by decision, not performing growth, becoming it. What is happening within you now does not need witnesses to be real. Progress continues whether anyone notices or not. You no longer measure growth through attention or reaction. Advancement has moved beyond performance and entered inevitability. Small provocations no longer pull you in. Where you once reacted instantly, you now evaluate structure. You study sequence. You trace causes long before outcomes appear. Your thinking has stretched forward, reaching beyond the present moment into possibilities others fail to consider. Timing is no longer accidental, it is chosen. Pressure no longer feels like threat, it becomes information. You assess it, measure it, and decide whether action is necessary or silence is more powerful. Restraint has transformed from suppression into strategy. Every decision passes through perspective before becoming movement. Experience reinforced your reasoning. Reflection sharpened it. What once felt scattered has formed architecture, a stable framework guiding how you think, speak, and act. Meanwhile, something else has changed around you. Those who once felt certain about you now carry quiet confusion. They sense movement but cannot identify its direction. The version of you they dismissed no longer exists in the way they remember. What they overlooked has organized itself into capability. What they underestimated has consolidated into strength. And you continue forward without announcement. Independence has become natural. Persistence has become rhythm. You move without rushing, yet momentum never stops. While others chase immediate validation, you invest in alignment, positioning actions where they will matter most over time. You've learned that influence is not created through noise, but through placement. The right action at the right moment outweighs endless effort. You allow others to underestimate duration while you extend yours. You allow distraction to occupy them while your focus remains steady. Over time, contrast grows unavoidable. Their assumptions weaken. Your clarity stabilizes. You are no longer moving towards strength, you are operating from understanding. Awareness now directs expansion, and awareness cannot easily be shaken. The need to argue your perspective has disappeared because time itself has begun confirming it. No explanation is necessary anymore. The judgments once placed on you have expired naturally. Distance erased their authority. Opinions that once attempted to define you no longer reach far enough to matter. Certainty replaced the need for validation. External approval cannot enhance something already integrated. You are no longer shaped by expectations imposed from outside. The identity you now inhabit is not newly created, it is revealed. It existed beneath misunderstanding, beneath projection, beneath every attempt to reduce you into something smaller. Composure confirms it. Clarity sustains it. Authority no longer feels borrowed from recognition. It feels internal, steady, and self-supported. You carry weight not because others grant it, but because you recognize it yourself. And recognition without dependence creates stability. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not shrink you. Both pass without altering direction. What has solidified inside you remains steady because it is authentic. You are not stepping into significance for the first time. You are acknowledging continuity, realizing that the strength was always present, simply unrefined. The mind they questioned was never chaotic, it was unfinished. The intensity they mocked was energy waiting for direction. Now it stands aligned. Not louder, clearer, not aggressive, precise, not seeking attention, impossible to ignore. The laughter that once followed you belongs to another chapter. It loses meaning when measured against growth. Those moments were never evidence of failure. They were early reactions to something not yet understood. Because force does not argue with doubt. It prepares quietly and reveals itself only when ready. You no longer chase recognition. You embody progress. The distance you once felt from others is no longer loneliness, it is perspective. You see further now, and distance is the natural result of expanded vision. There is no need to announce transformation. The proof exists in your calm, in your patience, in your precision. You were never lost, never broken, never what they assumed, only misread. And now, without noise, without permission, without apology, the same mind they laughed at has become undeniable.